1.7 introduced the first stage of changes to vehicles, but it introduced a set of issues that are making it difficult to properly assess those changes. Some mechanics, like the now fixed nitrous bug, which gave us racing tanks like this, and even backflipping tanks like this, tanks that move like that change the interaction between them, AV and dropships, and we can't base balance on bugs. That was a bug, but there are other game elements still making balance judgments difficult to make in a similar way. Specifically, I'm talking about the Redline. I'm going to focus on rail tanks because I see those as the largest issue, but many of my points will apply to anyone operating from the Redline. Rail tanks at the moment happen to highlight the issue much more clearly than any other weapon type. The Redline is a huge cause of imbalance issues. When you place a railgun tank into it, the level of imbalance becomes very damaging to the game indeed. I'll show you why the railgun tank is imbalanced against vehicles, and then we can go into the Redline in general. A rail tank's a hard counter to other tanks and dropships. These targets are tough and manoeuvrable. To be able to fight these vehicles, a rail tank needs long range and power so they can hit hard and they can hit at range. They also need to be able to aim into the air so they can counter dropships. Currently, rail tanks can deal massive damage at great range, which does fit their role. I support having powerful vehicles in the game that are able to restrict or destroy my dropship, or my tank, or kill my assault suit even. But how much range do they have, and is it balanced for the game as it is now? Look at this kill card. That's 5,807 damage, more than 1.5 times my dropship's hit points, from 624 meters away. This is where I was when he hit me. Let's clean that up and look at where I was and where he was on a better map. We were on Spine Crescent. I was killed here. This line represents all points 624 meters from my death, which means that's the line the tank could have been on. The gaps in the line represent where the line of sight is blocked by these structures, and also by my own red line, which he cannot be in. So where was he? I found him just after my death by asking a player on my team on the front line to pinpoint him by name for me. He was here. Let's put on the red line. This is his, which my team cannot enter. As you can see, he's deep into his own safe zone. Notice he's level with the MCC spawn point, which is here. So how deep is he into the zone? The green line represents 624 meters, and the wide orange line is 130 meters. I was hovering about the same altitude as the hill he is on, so it was a straight shot. I am just here, which is near, but outside of, my red line. I'm tucked behind the objective that is closest to my spawn, yet still I can be killed from his spawn. Notice my team is winning. We've captured all but one of the points, including the point closest to their spawn. Here is one of my squad, and we have tank support here and here. I was well back, waiting to pick up the person who has just hacked Echo, which you can see is changing hands. I'm doing everything right. I'm in a defensible position, playing the role of troop transport, and I'm using tank and infantry support, as well as getting reports from the front line. All of this tactical play by multiple people could be completely negated by one player who is as deep back as their MCC in the red line and not even on the actual battlefield. At 130 meters into his red line and on a hill, he's almost complete protection from enemy threats. At this range, he's safe from attack from a rail tank in our red line. Any player wishing to engage him has to step out of their red line and onto the battlefield. This puts every single opponent he faces at risk from attack from other players on the field. This is where the massive range rails have, combined with a red line, causes imbalance. Even an identical tank to his with the same range, the same damage and speed is not fighting on an even level, because it does not have the protection of a red line, while he does. It's an advantage solely his to wield. A player in this position should not be able to neutralize another player who's fighting the battle with team tactics and support. It damages the value of strategic and cooperative play. If I can die from a shot from a distance like that when the map is at its safest, how can I operate in an uncertain and aggressive battlefield? This is why the rail is an issue. It's not about individual loss, but about making the game less than it can be. It allows a single player to break an opposing team's tactics with no risk and from an unrealistically advantageous position. I'm not advocating that long-range anti-vehicle weapons should be removed, only that their ability to engage from the red line and to engage vehicles at altitude, or perhaps even very extreme ranges, should be restricted. My dropship, an infantry player's prototype suit and rifle, or a blaster tank, but all of limited use further than 150 meters away from any objective. But all of these cost over 200,000 ISK, $500,000 in the case of the dropship and the tank. We have to put our ISK at risk to participate. The Redline offers the rail tank, and indeed the sniper, an unfair ISK advantage. They can take ISK off me and add it to the battle payout they win at the fight's conclusion, yet it is almost impossible for me to take it off them, as they're safe in the Redline. The Redline does more than just offer defense, though. It offers offensive advantage as well. A tank or sniper that has to go out of the Redline to fight has to risk taking damage, so they tend to fit their vehicles and suits with some other armor or shields. This uses up PG and CPU plus module slots. However, Redliners can fill these slots with damage mods, as they have little use for defense. So not only do we have players sat in the Redline able to shoot and kill at those at objectives, but they're able to use builds that would fail on the field that offer them massive damage advantages. It's hard for any team to fight back against an opponent with massive range, incredible damage in an unreachable position. It's just simply not fair or enjoyable. This is not only an issue of a single statistic, range. Having a weapon with over 600 meters of range may be necessary on the larger maps that we will likely have in the future, but with the maps we have currently, it allows coverage of the entire map from the safety of the Redline. Clearly, this creates an imbalance. The developers design our vehicles to have windows of opportunity. I'm supposed to retreat when my modules are cooling down. On most maps, my own Redline is the only safe zone I can go to, and there's a difference between retreat and withdrawal, which is what returning to my Redline is, as I'm effectively leaving the battle area. There are other issues that compound the problem. I took a tank to the hill in the Redline on the same map and used the hills he was using during his battle with me earlier. This is what the battlefield looks like. The sockets are different than when I lost my dropship, but you can see how clearly the tank can see across the battle area. Notice the buildings offer some coverage to ground vehicles, but they will move into my line of sight during the course of the battle. It is much worse for dropships. There is almost nowhere at all for dropships to take cover. Dropships completely exposed at all times. This is what a dropship looks like from the same vantage point. It's almost 500 meters away, but it's easy to track and target. At 450 meters, I hit him easily when he landed to perform the job it's designed for, dropping off infantry. Had I been a better shot, I would have killed him in the air with ease. From these Redline spots, I can cover the operational airspace with my tank, while hidden from sight of any ground force. Doing this, I'm immune from any attack from the ground. The Redline gives any dropship to attack me a few shots before they must retreat, and that's if they can get close, as I can cover the whole sky from this spot anyway. These warehouses are low. Flying and operating behind them is not practical, as there are many obstacles, such as cranes, at the altitude that we might hit. We are also at risk from AV grenades, flare-lock pistols, and plasma cannons. The realistic operating height of a dropship is 50 to 100 meters. This allows us to avoid some AV fire, spot launch swarms, and react before they hit us. It also gives us an altitude buffer to recover from launch or swarm knockback. This friendly dropship is operating at the usual functional height. Any higher and he'd be unable to see ground troops or report enemy positions to his team. In effect, higher is useless. If it was an ADS, he would struggle to hit targets from above 100 meters, but from clearing uplinks and hires that are very small, any higher and are impossible to identify. Hot dropping troops has to be done from a low altitude as well. This is so they can land without the inertia damper. This leaves them able to fight immediately without the standing up animation that leaves them vulnerable, and also they don't take damage from the drop. Similar rules apply for picking troops up in hot zones. A call for help requires a quick response. A friendly surrounded by enemies needs a swift pickup if he's to be rescued, so I need to be nearby to the troops fighting and able to land quickly. If I'm too high, the success rate for extraction drops significantly. So 100 meters is not a careless attitude. It's within the sensible and necessary range to be able to perform the tasks expected of a dropship. At this point I get hit by an enemy tank, and I simply roll back a few meters and I'm safe, yet I can still see the dropship and hit it. Notice how easily I can track it. At this range, a rail turret has no problems tracking aircraft, and with the safety of the hill and the Redline, I'm free to shoot with impunity into the airspace above every single objective on the map. A railgun tank has a large elevation, which is how far it can look up, but how far is it? And why is elevation so important to railgun balance? Let me show you what the elevation is, Then I'll show you how this relates to balance against dropships. I can aim at this dropship as high as it can go, and even though it's using afterburners, I can track it easily. When it gets too high, simply roll back down the hill a bit and gain a bit more elevation. We need to know how well a rail tank can look up though, in other words its elevation. I did many tests like this one. The tank's parked on flat ground at the point where it can point up to the top of that container. When I'm on the container, I know this distance. When I'm on the ground, I know this distance. We apply math and we get the rest of the numbers. The average among my tests was 45 degrees. This is an estimate as the height of the player's gun, the tank's center point, and other variables can change the results, but after many tests, 45 degrees was by far the most common result. This gives us a rail tank elevation that looks like this, with a safe zone like this. Now let me explain why elevation is so important to game balance. This target's 81 meters away. My actual altitude is likely around 80 meters. Notice how tiny those two infantry players are. They are similar colour to the background and only a few pixels in size. It's difficult to hit targets even from as low as 80 meters. Look at this blue here. See this flash? And this bullet trail. The blue flash is the blue player's shield being hit. The bullet trail is coming from an enemy player. The fact that we can see the flash means the blue player is on the roof. Bear in mind that on this map he could have been under the roof, but could you tell? If he'd been an enemy, I would not have known if he was under cover or on the roof. Here I am exactly above objective Alpha. As you can see, I'm 102 meters up. See here that the bullet trail goes behind the blue, so we know this is incoming fire, which means the enemy's here. See him? No? Me neither. This is his muzzle flash. See him yet? He stops shooting, and I am still 97 meters above Alpha. And he becomes invisible. Imagine he was not shooting, but just moving. How effective would I have been at engaging him? But maybe he died. Nope. There's his muzzle flash again. I tried to move in and engage him, but get forged. Let's wind that back to the beginning now that we know where the players in this game are. Here I am at double the height, 200 meters. See that faint bullet trail? You may struggle as it's very faint. That blue and red are in the same positions as when we were at 100 meters, but this is the start of their fight. At 200 meters, do I have any chance at all to even attempt to target the enemy? Clearly not. He was a muzzle flash at 100 meters, and at 200 there's absolutely no chance for me to engage or even identify him as a target. Here is a side-by-side comparison of 100 meters and 200 meters. Even at 100 meters the world below is small, and at 200 is really just background. Let's look at the 100 meters more closely. Notice that at 100 meters the tallest building offers some cover, but these two side buildings do not. As you see, being above these leaves me open to fire from outside of the complex, and I'm easily in range of rails in the Redline, or even just outside of it. At 200 meters I'm completely exposed. Notice the only other structures tall enough to give me some cover are these thin towers, and what they offer is a sliver of cover at best. The map is Iron Delta. Their red line's here, and I'm here. This red circle represents the area a rail tank can hit me from when I'm hovering at 200 meters. The green area is where, at this height, the rail's turret cannot point up enough to hit me, or that some of the buildings get in the way. But I'm useless up here, as we know. Drop down to 100 meters, where I might be useful, and the safe zone shrinks. At 100 meters, the only spot where I cannot be hit by the rail tank is this small blue zone. But at 100 meters, plasma cannon swarms and forges can hit me with ease. In effect, there's no spot to take cover. The threat is constant. In this clip, I'm 100 meters up in the complex that's got a few buildings and the orbital cannon. These offer me some limited cover from distant rails. However, I'm then struck by swarms. The forge shot that you see go past there actually missed me. As you can see, the knock is so hard it sends me careening into the buildings. I die. This is why using structures as cover and being low is hazardous. I'm at risk up high, down low, and even behind cover. It's not just weapons we have to deal with, it's the maneuverability of the dropship, and the airspace, and the physical hazards. My point here is that the maximum effective engagement height for a dropship is up to 100 meters. Above that, it's extremely difficult to even see that there's a target, let alone hit it. It is possible, but it's a rare occurrence. Most other dropship tasks take place at or below 100 meters. For example, our best scanners have 100 meters range, landing for pickup is done at 0 meters, and drops are done at around 50. A dropship above 100 meters is not really in the fight. Remember that a forge can engage us at 300 meters and a swarm at 175, so I have to get through 200 meters of hostile air before I can engage. What has all this got to do with a rail's range and its elevation? Imagine I want to drop off troops and fight the enemy on the ground. As we've seen, fighting enemies when higher than 100 meters is not effective. Dropping troops has the same limitations, as above that they could be dropping into a hostile area with no knowledge of enemy positions and without the sight gun support. Plus on landing they have the dampener animation, which leaves them vulnerable as they stand up. My scanners only work at 100 meters max as well. So despite a dropship's ability to go up to 700 meters, on some but not all maps, we operate almost exclusively at 100 meters or lower. Let's take Spine Crescent again. I'm attacking Objective Alpha, the objective that's in the middle of the map, roughly equidistant from both teams' spawn points. It's here. There is a rail tank here, 115 meters into his red line. So the rail tank, due to the angle it's at from the objective, is 400 meters from Alpha. Each square in this grid is 100 meters, and this grid is scaled to the Spine Crescent map I just showed you. Here is Alpha. The enemy red line's here, my red line's here. That puts the rail tank here, 115 meters into the safe zone. The enemy tank is 400 meters from Alpha and is safe in his red line. This is the area of the sky he can hit a dropship in. Base damage from an advanced turret is 1,667.5 hit points. Remember this? That's the world from 200 meters up, which is the height of the MCC on many maps. At 200 meters I can travel but not scan or see enemies below me, or perform the most basic dropship tasks. Now look at this coverage map. This box is 200 meters and lower. That single tank in the red line can deny me 80% of the airspace below 200 meters. But we know that 100 meters is an effective operating height, with most dropship tasks taking place at 80 meters or lower. At the realistic operating height, a single tank could deny me almost 90% of the useful airspace. That's a single tank. What if there's an enemy forge gunner, swarmer, and some infantry attacking the objective? Let's plot in a swarmer, plasma user, and a forge gunner. And we'll add in the base damages for those weapons. Before I can even get near a position to be effective, say here, I have to cross two zones of engagement where I could easily take 3,042 damage. That's enough to almost kill me. To effectively help at Alpha, I have to be here. While in this zone, should I be struck just once by each weapon controlling that zone, I'll take 5,245 damage. A single rail tank could do that alone in a quarter of a second. I'm in multiple engagement zones here, and due to rail and forge range, my escape avenue is still covered by several zones with a potential 3,042 damage risk, and that's assuming I'm hit only once on my way out. Look up from that point. If altitude is my escape route, you can see how many zones I have to cross and how deep they are, with a rail tank creating a massively deep zone on its own. My point. The size and number of engagement zones is too high. The airspace, almost every single map, is covered by multiple weapons, and there is just no cover. There's nowhere to hide, there's nowhere to be safe, except for these small zones, the white ones on the map, near the back. Does a rail tank need this, and this, or would this do? So why did I spend so much time showing you what a battle looks like to a dropship at a certain height, and why did I show you the chart with the tank's cone of attack? To prove that dropships have no cover in the air, we need a place to hide. Just like ground troops have walls, our cover is up. But rails can currently cover our safe zone with ease. To stop a dropship, a tank only needs to be able to aim up about 100 meters, maybe 150. As I have shown, we are useless above about 100 meters. A rail tank has power and range, a dropship has altitude. With 45 degrees of elevation, a rail tank also has altitude as a strength. To fight other tanks, it needs that power, and the range gives it a special ability and unique role on the battlefield. If we reduce the elevation, then we can change the dynamic between a rail tank and a dropship without damaging their effectiveness against other tanks. We know that a dropship is of little use above 100 meters. What I'm saying is that at the moment, rail tanks can hit great altitude at great range. This is not needed for fighting tanks, which is what their power is for. It also gives them too much of an advantage over dropships, or giving them too few weaknesses. If a rail wants to engage a dropship at its advantage, when it's high up, then the tank has to use its strength, range, to do it. Get too close, and the dropship has the advantage, altitude. You may argue that this makes rail tanks vulnerable to dropships, and it does. Rail tanks have range and power to fight tanks and dropships, but let us get too close and you're at the disadvantage. Remember that your range, say it's 450 meters or even 600 meters, gives you 600 meters to see us coming. Also remember that a forge or swarm has no elevation restriction, so they can fight us just as well up close. But a powerful tank has to balance how he engages rather than dominating from close or far, which is how it is currently. It's AV infantry up close and rails at range. Balance. This will not affect tank battles at all, it's just a dropship thing. Tankers can be defended from dropships easily. Fit a turret on the roof and you can hit us with the exact same weapon we're hitting you with. It becomes a fitting balance. No top turret, and dropships have great advantage, if they're above you. But you can fit damage mods in defense and be a powerful tank counter in this situation. Fit air defense, i.e. a top turret, or even carry a forge gunner in one of your turrets if it's a weak one or not, and then you lose the damage modules but can still engage from range. The choice is yours. Fight with air defense but less tank and power, or up close with power but a vulnerability to air attack. The current tank elevation, fire rate, and power means too many strengths with limited weaknesses. If you reduce the range and elevation of rail tanks too much, though, dropships become too hard to counter with them, which is bad. We do not want that. However, half the current elevation and reduce range to 450 meters, and we get this. As you can see, he can still hit the 100 meter zone from just outside his redline. But the tank is more vulnerable to dropships because of its reduced elevation. But it's not vulnerable to other tanks though. However, if he has a top turret and a gunner, then he can be close with air defense but less HP. It becomes a dynamic build decision based on the current battle. Elevation gives better altitude aiming the further away you are. This fits the rail perfectly. Want to hit dropships up high, then fall back and use your strength range. Get close and you lose your advantage. That's balance. Rail tanks need to be dangerous, powerful, long-range vehicles to keep other tanks from running around uncontested. When I hear a squad mate say rail tank, I should feel fear. But we need to bring them onto the battlefield so I can use my forge gunners or my tanks and send them after them. However, reduce the range too much and they are no threat, because at short range they can lose their speciality, which is power over a long distance, which is something that we should keep. Rails need to be forced out of the redline and have their elevation reduced, as well as the range, until we have some bigger maps. We need to stop players from fighting from the redline, yet still allow them to push out if locked in. In this game, I'm redline, but I break it easily by calling in a lav and racing out. Then again, by using a militia dropship to get to an objective and place an uplink. Perhaps fighting your way out of the red line is not needed. If so, perhaps we can stop all incoming and outgoing fire from crossing the red line. It's a staging point, not a battlefield. There are other ways to fix the red line. Move it so far back that no one in it can engage the nearest objective. Set a timer on any player or vehicle, and once you leave the red line you cannot return for 5 minutes. Combine this with weapons being inactive until you leave, and then you are forced to leave and forced into the battle. Whatever the fix, we need to stop players using the red line for the whole game as a battle zone that they never leave, while still killing those at objective and being rewarded for it. Rail tanks highlight this perfectly. Killing other tanks and dropships from safety is unbalanced. Having coverage of the sky is unbalanced. Having so much power combined with red line to red line range and 8,000 damage in a quarter of a second is unbalanced. Rail tanks do not need 45 degrees of elevation to counter dropships. Dropships need somewhere to run, and I've shown that they currently don't have that. We need to very carefully dial back the rail tank's range and elevation, and we need to stop people killing those at objectives from within the red line. Fair fights are fun fights. We need to stop the red line users and make it worth everyone's time to get out of the red line and into the battle. Risk gains reward. Cowardice should not. YOLO swag, Stefan. YOLO swag. You have been judged.